Mr. Bellamy,
Present.
Mr. Cummings,
Present.
Mr. Pline,
Present.
Mr. Sfakianudis,
Present.
and my name is Robert Waldman, and I am, of course, present. We have an agenda tonight. I'd like to make one change. I would like to put a small item first, for which I don't think there'll be testimony tonight, to get that out of the way and make sure it doesn't get lost in any kind of shuffle. So we will put 03025 and before 02925. And with that, do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good. We have a little bit of business to perform. We have 3 minutes from past meetings. And let us start with the May 8th meeting, all of which was available to our commissioners, assuming you've read it. Any changes, additions, comments? All right. Motion to approve
So moved.
and seconded.
I second.
Okay. Without any edits or comments to be added, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I'm abstaining because I wasn't at that meeting.
All right, Mr. Pline abstains. Planning Commission public meeting, June 5th. Once again, set of minutes prepared by our clerk, who was absent tonight on her own vacation. But as usual, they're clear and complete to my mind. Any edits? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
June 26th. Any edits?
Should say world's shortest meeting.
Huh? Let's see.
It's a
who was-
record.
Mr. Pline was
Yeah.
present at that meeting.
Yes.
If I recall, he was in some exotic foreign locale.
No.
No? You were here?
305 Monterey.
All right. Any edits?
No.
Nope.
Motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are done. I would like to move then to 3025. This is a business, this is a slight zoning change to a corner of Clay and Cathedral Street. Franklin.
West Washington.
Mr. Lashinsky? Mr. Lashinsky is the Chief of Comprehensive Planning for the city, and he will make a staff report.
Good evening, planning commissioners. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. And
AC Ortiz, conference planner.
Gentlemen.
so we tag teamed the staff report that you received on this legislation, and it is a brief piece of legislation. I would clarify it as a correction to our zoning code for the business revitalization district. This is a zone that was created around 25 years ago with the intent of revitalizing an area of the city around the Clay Street corridor. It's a very small zoning district. It includes maybe just a dozen properties. The zoning district was well intended, but has not really had much impact. It hasn't really led to the kind of investment that it was envisioning. And we've learned of an aspect to the bulk standards that is one of the reasons for that. And it's a mismatch in the allowed height of that zoning district and the floor area ratio. And the issue is that you can't actually reach the allowed height with the floor area ratio that's in the bulk standards. The floor area ratio is 2.0 today, which essentially means if you max out the site, you can go 2 stories, but you're allowed to go to 2.5 stories or up to 35 feet. So if you want to fill out a site, use it as efficiently as possible, you really can't get to the maximum number of stories. And so for that reason, the legislation is intended to correct that in the bulk standards. And we added an additional standard to lead to what we felt would be development that would be more consistent with the surrounding character, which is predominantly 2-story row houses. And that standard is if you exceed the 20 feet in height, the street frontage must step back 3 feet for the height above that 20 feet initially. And then that setback could be a balcony, it could be some kind of usable space, but that was the intent, just to sort of maintain that kind of street wall condition. I will acknowledge there's a massive parking garage across the street that is not 2 stories tall, but most of the row homes in that area are about 2 stories today. So that's the extent of the legislation. There's a map that we put with the staff report that just shows, this is a zone that's close to downtown. It's essentially in the downtown area. It's near the mixed use zoning district, and we think it's really an extension of the mixed use zoning district. So, but that's the intent of it.
Just one question. Have you had interest in the past from people that want to either replace a building or revitalize a building, saying that just can't make it work because of that mismatch?
Yeah, we've talked. Yeah, some of the property owners have expressed concern about that. Yeah, and I should also reinforce that this is something that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. We're trying to activate places that have the opportunity to be more mixed use in their development program, and basically there's an opportunity to expand housing stock in this area and in the types of units that don't exist there today. So that's the benefit of making this correction and allowing for that type of development. So.
Any further questions?
I don't.
Okay. We've all had actually months to look at this. I'll now open a public hearing. Is there anybody present who would like to testify? Please come to the podium. Let's make sure that the mic is on. And fellow commissioners, make sure when you speak that your mics are on. No.
Hi, Tara Stout, 1174 Bay Highlands Drive, Annapolis. I'm working with a property owner in this area, and as I kind of agree pretty much with everything Eric said. What I discovered when I was approached about helping someone kind of do something with their property was that this business revitalization zone is basically a revitalization zone in name only, created sometime between the 1985 and 1998 comp plans. And I guess that predates all of us, and it's likely that until somebody decides they want to do something in an area, nobody really delves into the details. So while planning and zoning has, graciously put forth an amendment, I'm just going to be clear that, as Eric knows, kind of doesn't give us everything we asked for. And so I am not a designer, it's not my area of expertise. And until we have an architect look at it, hopefully the 2.5 FAR works. But one of the things I want to kind of alert you to that's also in the bulk regulations is currently right now, in order to develop any unit, whether it's commercial or residential, you have to have 520 square feet of land per unit. So as it sits right now, the properties that kind of brought this issue to light equate to having a maximum 6.4 units per the city code. Right now, there are 6 units on that property. So really what this additional FAR in height does is it allows you to kind of have larger units. It won't really allow an increased density because we haven't proposed any change to the lot area per unit that's required. The other item that we asked for that Quite candidly, I don't understand the resistance from planning and zoning. And again, I'm not a designer, so it may be a communication gap that somebody else would understand better than I. But I sat through this planning commission meeting a few weeks back where everybody was on board to provide excess height for whether you call them roof equipment, appurtenances, above the height limit in the zone in the conservation and historic district. And that exists in the code right now in the MX. We asked for actually a mere 5 feet, and quite candidly, the 5 feet was my guess because I'm not a designer. And just because we were told by all the architects we interviewed, most of which didn't really even want to touch this project, that the 35 feet is not a great height when you take in the roof and want to have ample ceiling heights to build by today's standards, so that getting that incremental footage for rooftop equipment could be a real asset. So I'd like to call your attention to Section 2150-260, bulk regulations, table MX district, which is essentially a block away from this district, that the height of rooftop accessory structures, including but not limited to utility penthouses and architectural appurtenances, shall not exceed 12 feet above the maximum height under this section. And so I'm baffled as to why, when we didn't even we asked for 5 feet. If we needed it, we were even willing to limit it to purely rooftop equipment, and we keep getting a hard no. And so after I listened to Jay Schwartz extensively, and obviously he is certainly way more versed in the issue than I am about what the height of this new equipment is. But it's just mind-boggling to me that the department and the planning commission can say in a conservation district, you can get up to 15 feet on the roof, but in an area that's been zoned revitalization for almost 40 years, you can't get anything. So I just would ask you in your recommendations to consider that this BR zone should be afforded the same, ability that other zones nearby are as far as rooftop equipment. I'm not looking to escape any public process. Anybody who knows me, who's worked on the Willows, knows I'm very transparent with the community. We will, we've already met with the community on this project, and if it progresses, because we get to zoning, we will certainly make sure that the community has an opportunity to weigh in on what they want. It's not my place to dictate what the community wants, but I do believe that every area of the city should be afforded equal opportunity. And for those who aren't familiar with the history of this area, we are talking about the area of the city that has felt disenfranchised since urban renewal, saddled with a ridiculous zone that one would argue is spot zoning that basically has precluded anything from happening in that area. So if we're going to make a step to fix it now, let's fix it so it can actually work. I would also propose, maybe it's a 2.5 FAR. I'm not a designer. Eric says it works. But what planning and zoning often doesn't recognize, and quite honestly, sometimes people on the planning commission, that people can say anything works, but does it work to be economically viable? In fact, in this instance, why would anybody decide I'm going to do something with my property? It's not going to be worth it if I'm going to add 200 feet and I can't get any more income from it. So I think that this idea that everybody wants to play designer and think that this is what they think works, have they analyzed the economics to know whether it's economically viable? And that will be the next stage once this goes through. So I would just simply say, I'm pretty certain that every designer would like to have that same benefit for extra height for the rooftop equipment. And I would say, to me, FAR is basic math. You take the size of the lot and you times it by 2. If you're allowing for 3 stories in height, you're never going to get to a full 3 FAR because the code has setbacks and everything else. So why not let the designers work out those details and just give them the benefit of the 3.0 FAR, because they have to submit a site plan for development that honors setbacks, so you're never going to get to 100% 3 FAR in an area that has setback requirements. So it just seems that we continue to hamper development in certain areas where somebody wants to do something, and then bend over backwards in other areas. And this is a community that I think is really excited at the prospect that somebody wants to invest in that community. And so I'm just asking you to consider adding those recommendations to your, hopefully formal recommendation to approve this ordinance. And I do want to say Eric has been very helpful, as has Chris and Karma O'Neill. But I think that I'm not convinced that what they've proposed is going to be economically viable for somebody to actually do anything. And if we're going to fix it, let's fix it so it works.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, going back to the unit size, the
Right.
first thing you mentioned was it 565 feet?
Yeah, I have my reading glasses on. So the two properties that we're talking about have a land area of 3,300 square feet, basically. The bulk regulations in the code say any unit, whether it's a commercial unit or a residential unit, has to have 520 square feet of land. So if you take the land square footage and divide it by 520, you get to 6.4. And essentially, you can't do anything because there's already 6 units there. And that's why I'm saying
I guess my question is, is there a market for, say there were residential units, a market for, 450 square foot unit?
Well, they're rented right now. There's what the properties comprise right now is the first floors are commercial, but quite candidly, it's a challenging commercial area. One of the units is vacant. The other is, it's struggling owner because there's just not enough demand in the market for the use. So I calculated the average land area per residential unit, kind of coming prepared again after your questions for Jay. I was like, I'm not going to be as quick as him. I better bring the worksheet. So right now it looks like the average land assessed per unit is about 509. So that's why I'm saying without the MX zone, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, the MX zone does not have a land requirement per unit. So whether the land requirement per unit could be taken out of this, and then we could determine, the market could decide, is there a need for these small micro units that everybody's talking about, or does somebody redevelop and have larger units than what exists now?
Okay, thanks. Yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of what I was getting at.
Right.
Seems sort of an artificial. I mean, I'm thinking about this just in general, that we often force areas of units, whether commercial or residential, to be a certain size because that's what we feel people should have, even if there's a demand in the market for something smaller.
I'm in agreement with you. And again, I go back to somebody wrote this BR zone sometime between the 1985 and 1998 comp plan. So who knows what they were thinking? I don't think any of us were here then. And I think it is arbitrary, like a lot of things in the code, and the market will decide. So I would, if you want to take that out and recommend eliminating it, I say great.
Okay, and I had one more question actually for Eric.
Okay.
On the second one, on the FAR. So, I mean, in this area, the development pattern it's very traditional, where the buildings are attached, more or less. And that's why you have this standard, so that you don't end up with some jaggies and something that's incongruous. I guess, so given that, I mean, why do you even have an FAR requirement? Because it's sort of assumed it's this traditional development pattern where the buildings are going to be connected. Why not just have the height limit? Why even have that?
Well,
I'm not
there
really
is
sure what that does.
Well, it's not the historic district. I mean, there is the potential for a wholesale redevelopment. I mean, somebody in effect could demolish a group of properties and build, new construction. So I think it's primarily for that reason. But I would say the height limit is in this situation like this, where the properties are fairly, limited in size. Even if you compile a few together, the height limit is probably the most significant standard to sort of regulating things.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's kind of what I'm getting at. I
Yeah.
don't, it seems to me that FAR generally has sort of perverse effects because it forces you to shape a building a certain way and deal with the footprint.
Mhm.
It maybe not what you want to do.
Mhm.
That's sort of
The other thing, just again, I've been over in the area and I'm sure you all know it, but yes, it's an area with a lot of, townhouses, 2-story duplexes, but you also have Bauman Court over there, the parking garage, the Stanton Center. So it's really a eclectic area in the sense that it's truly a mix of, some commercial structures that are higher than 3 feet and the residential. And then you've got Morris Bloom all the way down the end of the block, which is way higher.
all right. Thanks.
Okay.
Eric, the equipment on the roof that you're speaking of, why is that not the same as the MX zone? Why is it not being proposed?
To be fair, I don't have a good answer for you. I perhaps that was brought to our plan director. I was not involved in discussing that clause or whether that should be in this legislation or not. I honestly don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I haven't really had time to really look at the context of what is allowed in the MX. I mean, she's correct in that this is adjacent to the MX zone, but this is identified as a
It
mixed
seems like
use.
there should be some continuity to the whole thing.
What would making these accessory structures as special exceptions, does that make sense? I mean, what makes sense here? I'm not so sure that.
We're putting it into the MX zone.
Well, yes, that's in the long run. That's probably the thing. Except we're faced with this.
It's in the MX zone already.
Adhere to the same guidelines.
It's still a whole different zone. It's adjacent to it, but it is a different zone.
Okay.
It's not in the right.
It's if I'd encourage all of you to look at the map and look at the BR zone. I think you can count on your fingers how many properties are impacted by this zone.
Very few.
Right.
I mean, I think the intent of the MX zone when it was created was to yield denser, larger development along the corridor, West Street corridor. So, I mean, there may have been a difference in perspective as to what outcome was intended here, but it's a legitimate thing for the commission to take up, for sure.
I have a question for the madam. If you're doing only a 3-story building with 6 units or 7 units or whatever is allowed here, why would you even need accessory structures like a central air conditioning system?
What I was told, again, we've talked to several architects, and actually the one that was most helpful, who will likely do the project if we're able to move forward, is Dan Douglas, who did 161 West Street. And it was at his impetus that it would be great if he could have a little bit of extra height for the structures, because he knows how hard it was to beat the height at the MX zone. But the MX zone had the ability to allow for the rooftop equipment. So I think that what we're asking for is not to necessarily have any rooftop structure, but to be able to have, equipment up there. I guess it does beg the question if, somebody wanted to develop it and have, rooftop deck, that might be something somebody could look at. But I think it would be just like it is in other areas. Maybe that would be something that everything has to go through public scrutiny. We're not opposed to that. But what we really wanted it for was the equipment.
Right. And my second question is, I want to make sure I understand. The addition of from 2.0 to 2.5 FAR, does not allow you to build yet another unit in this currently 6-unit building?
Well, first off, unless you eliminate the 520 square feet per unit, how do you build 4/10 of one unit? So you can't do it. for starters. So that right there, the land size per unit comes into effect. But I think what the thought process was, and again, I'm not a designer, but what the thought process was is the area has a lot of history and a lot of character, and wanting to be respectful to something that blends into the communities. One of the concepts that was considered and that we did discuss with planning and zoning was to try to maintain the existing structures and to build a floor above those. And in which case, that's where I'm saying if we didn't change the land size per unit, at least you could offer larger units. Or quite honestly, right now the units are very small. People are living in them, but it is an area where it's probably one of the fewer affordable areas for people to own their homes. So I think that this opportunity provides a nice vehicle for people to rent, who then they might be able to afford to buy something when it comes for sale in Town Pines Court or, along that street. But, it would be foolish to spend a lot of money unless you're going to get a return on that investment.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Lichtenstein, so why do we have this FAR?
The original FAR in there, is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like that's the impediment, or the 520 square foot.
I don't know.
Or,
I don't know what the original intent was with that FAR. It seems misguided, from our perspective. But
What would be the consequences of changing that requirement for
it would just allow a future building to go to the maximum allowed height.
any negative consequences of it?
Yeah, I think the adverse impacts are not so significant in my opinion. But
Keep in mind, there's so few properties that are zoned BR that this is a test case. It's not like it's going to have wide implications throughout the city because there's only a handful of properties with this zoning.
right, this is an intersection at the gateway to a community that should have kind of a more intense development, in my opinion, from an urban design perspective. And there's an existing set of properties that could be better utilized.
I'm confused. What's limiting the number of units or the size of the units? Is it the Florida area ratio, or is it the 520?
That is effectively with most of our residential zones, you have a lot size that you use to calculate how many units you can fit on that site. So in this case, it's kind of a unit size, 550 or 520 square feet. So you basically take the lot area and you divide that by that number, 520, to calculate the number of units. And so that's not changing. So you're still going to be, the number of units will be limited to the 6 or so, but for whatever, it all depends on what your property is, if you're combining multiple properties and so forth. But what she's sharing is one scenario, but but that's the impediment to more units is just that lot size, that unit size.
One of the things I'll say is in the 01425, where you guys are evaluating changing the lot size per unit from 1750 down to 850, those zones don't have an FAR issue. So I think the issue here is that these BR zone properties are encumbered by height, FAR, and lot size per unit that don't align towards a vision that anybody can get anything done. And I think that's evidenced by not just me standing here, but by the fact that nothing's happened with this BR zone since it was created.
So, but the legislation changes the FAR, right, from 2.0 to 2.5?
Correct.
Okay. It also deals with the height limit?
No, it does not. They would not deal with the height. Any change for equipment, I was told explicitly every time I asked by the director that no. In fact, I even asked him after I listened to the last meeting and said, I'm not trying to be flip, but how can you actually stand here and tell me you're approving 15 feet in the historic conservation area and 0 for equipment in a revitalization zone?
I got you. Okay. Thank you.
And the other thing I'd say is if we could eliminate that size per unit from a lot perspective, we can then test the market. Is there a demand for kind of these micro units you guys are talking about with small units, or do we just maintain the unit count but make them a little larger?
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. That was long. Anybody else? Tyler Avenue? No. Take your time. We'll get there. Plenty of time tonight. So I will close the public hearing on this on 030, or on 030. Any discussion here at this point?
Yeah.
Yes. What do you have to
I
say?
think Ms. Stout makes some great points, and the fact that really nothing's really happened here says that, to me, it looks like the zoning is just highly overspecified with height, FAR, high minimum lot size. And if the intent really is for it to be revitalized, given that it is such a small area, I think they should make some changes to spur something to happen here. As it even says in the staff report, this is an area that's had very little investment, and we should be doing everything we can to make that opportunity there for reinvestment. And I see no.
What specifically do you propose?
I would like to recommend that we make it so there can be smaller unit sizes. I think both the commercial and residential, might very, very much smaller commercial spaces are much more likely that, a family business could run in 400 square feet than 800 or whatever's sort of in vogue in typical commercial rentals. So I think that's one. And also for smaller units. I think there's a market for micro apartments, but it'd be nice to see if there is, but without actually having something that lets you do it.
Yeah.
So I think there's the lot size, and I think she makes a good. Well, second is I would just get rid of the FAR. Recommend that we just remove the FAR requirement. Keep the height limit. We'll make a comment on that next, but just remove FAR. It just seems like a requirement that just isn't needed. That has this sort of weird effects on the shapes of buildings and stuff. And then lastly, given that it's next to the MX zone and you have these very tall structures that are, sort of much taller, like the garage, I don't understand why. I understand why that it doesn't have the same afforded the same height relief that the MX zone has. It seems like this should all be, and that's something we talked about in the comprehensive plan, is making these MX zones, these sort of these mixed use zones generically all be much more similar. So we're not saying, okay, you can do certain things in these few buildings on this block, something really different over there. I think we should recommend have basically the same sort of things that are in the MX zone, because that postdates this original BR zoning, because the MX stuff has happened in the last 20 years maybe. The standards for the MX zone are more current than what was originally put in that BR zone. So I think the BR zone is just sort of an anachronism, and let's just make it similar to other mixed use and afford the same ability to develop it as other places in the city that are quite similar. So that would be my recommendation.
I had a question for you, Mr. Klein. Just want to make sure I understand, because first it sounded like you said leave the height limit alone, but then it seemed like you might have contradicted that and said.
Well, I said we'll get to that. So, then the next thing is I see no reason why we couldn't address that also.
Okay, great. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I am in agreement. I almost see this extra zone being there, being a limiter rather than just wholesale bringing it into the MX zone. But, it's not our piece of legislation, but we can recommend that.
So just this, sorry.
I mean, I agree. And if the intention is affordable housing, then you have to make for smaller unit size. And there has to be continuity to have one. It is spot zoning. I mean, you saw the size of it. So I think it should be in line with the MX zone.
I'm persuaded by Alex's comments about what recommendations, what we should do.
Just to sum up, I think the step that's made in the legislation is proposed is a step in the right direction, but it's a really small step in a path that should be.
It needs more.
They should be taking 100 steps instead of half.
Yeah.
Mr. Lashinsky, what would be the consequences to this if the entire zone were changed to MX? What do you think would happen with the
Well, Casey was just mentioning what that was our intent. Our original intent in the next phase of our comprehensive rezoning was to essentially integrate the BR zone into the MX zone. But given that we have an election coming up and there's a new council member, a new mayor, we weren't going to be able to move in that direction till probably next spring. So realistically, this idea of amending the BR was suggested as kind of a more immediate assistant fix to the zone. So that was kind of the genesis of it. But our division, generally recommends that it's
So if you had a clean slate, would you recommend that it become MX?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have another question about these accessory structures on the roof. Why is there resistance?
I don't know what the resistance is.
All right. Does anybody want to make any kind of a motion here?
I would make a motion that we recommend that the BR essentially be, if they don't change the name of it, but essentially adopt all the same requirements and standards. They can still call it the BR, but just make it have the same. I know changing the name of a zone probably has some.
Well, I should
process.
have added. The only reason we didn't do that is we were looking at a broader consolidation of zoning districts, and the BR was one of these zones that has not yielded much outcome, and so it was in the crosshairs, I would say, for just integrating into the MX as a way to revive it. But we were looking at a wide variety of other zones, and so it got more complicated. It was just a one-off thing.
Yeah.
It's much more
All
straightforward.
right. So how about this from and that we can recommend that happen, that what you said happens sooner rather than later. We can say that this is a step in the right direction, but doesn't go far enough. And perhaps we could recommend the smaller unit sizes, little extra height, just as additional little steps. But really, what we'd like to happen is for this larger change to happen more quickly.
Would you care to refine your motion rather than this generalization?
Sure.
So adopt all standards applicable to MX zones. And that sort of solves most of the question issues that are on the floor.
Yeah.
And you would like to add the comment that this is but a step in the right direction. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I would be happy to write those findings, since it's my motion. If you were probably going to go there anyway. So that's my motion.
All right. There's a motion on the floor that that we recommend an approval of this legislation, but we note strongly that one, it should go further and by one, adopt all standards that are applicable to the MX zone, solves the issues of floor area, unit size, accessory structure, height. And two, emphasize that while it's a step in the right direction, it needs to go further and comprehensive. Okay? That satisfy what's been said?
Yes, for me.
Okay.
I like it.
Mr. Klein makes that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Now, with respect to findings, remember we have another meeting within a week. Let's get on. Okay? All right. Okay, we can now move to 02925, which is the Tyler Avenue Complete Community Overlay District. And the procedure we're going to follow here is we're going to the staff, Mr. Lisinski and Mr. Ortiz, are going to. Okay. All right, good. I have to sign up. They're going to make a presentation and hopefully answer outstanding questions with information and fact. Commission may ask questions, and then I will open the public hearing. What I'll do is I'll call the names in the order with which you came, and anybody else who didn't come in time to sign in. I want you to clearly announce your name and address so that later the clerk can do things correctly easily. And I'm not going to impose, a time limit, but I want you to keep your comments, I want them factual, okay? We don't need a lot of speeches. What we need are facts. Now, you can express your opinions, and I want you to express them freely, but let's not go on and on and on, because if you do, I'll do something, okay? In agreement? Okay. Mr. Lashinsky.
All right, thank you. I'm going to try to make this quick. I know everybody's been patient. Thank you for your patience. Thanks for coming out tonight. This is a piece of legislation that reflects a community process that we've been conducting for the last 6 months or so. And it's called the Tyler Avenue Complete Community. The genesis, and you've heard about this before. We've been in front of you all in the past to share what we were working on with this project. And initially, it started as recommendations, and it's part of our larger comprehensive rezoning initiative that we've spoken to you about, which is essentially a 3-year work plan. And this is the first phase. The Tyler Avenue Complete Community is one piece of that we felt we could reasonably accomplish before the election, where a new city council turns over and we have a new mayor. And but essentially, we're trying to come up with zoning changes that will make the zoning map, the zoning code, and the comprehensive plan more consistent. Comprehensive plan needs no introduction to you all. You were part of the drafting of it and helped us get there pretty substantially, and your fingerprints are all over it. But we're trying to implement the goals of the comprehensive plan right now through the comprehensive rezoning. These are some of the things we're trying to achieve that are citywide goals, and they can be implemented in different ways throughout the city at the neighborhood scale. We have a zoning map that you all are also familiar with. There's 31 different zoning districts. It's a chaotic, hard to understand map. We want to ultimately consolidate those zones. We just got into that discussion about how we could do that with the BR zone. In the meantime, we have some ideas for how we can improve conditions in certain places. And this part of the city is unique. And the genesis for focusing on this area came from Alderman Gay, whose Ward 6 covers the majority of this corridor from Bay Ridge Avenue to Forest Drive. The Tyler Avenue corridor includes a variety of property sizes, but has a trend of large, deep lots. Unlike most other parts of the city, it's an area that is close to a lot of great things: parks, schools, retail. It's a cut through for a lot of people, frankly, who are trying to get over to Forest Drive or to Bay Ridge Avenue, and they drive hazardly. And so some of the issues that have been made, eminently clear over the last few years are just how dangerous the corridor is. People drive really fast. The design of the street is part of that, but it's also the density, the number of the sort of pattern of development along the corridor. Over time, this area of the city has filled in from farmland 100 years ago to what we have today. But along this corridor, it's partly because the streets don't necessarily cut through. You have a lot pattern that is just different, and that's part of the character of it. If you look closely at kind of the development footprints today, you can see the variation from Tyler Avenue to just immediate streets, and see kind of the regular lot pattern of the adjacent neighborhoods contrasts with what you see along Tyler Avenue. Just showing one blow up of what that looks like. The pink blobs are footprints of built homes, and then the white area is undeveloped area, and then you have driveways, and the brown are the fences. So the comprehensive plan talks extensively about the relationship between transportation and land use. They both work with each other. You have safer streets when you have neighborhoods where the buildings are engaged with the street. They're closer to the street. You have a neighborhood that looks like this is going to have a streetscape character where people drive more slowly. You have more people walking, you have more people biking, and you have people driving through cautiously, expecting to see people on the street. This is an image we found that captured what we thought would improve this area if the development code allowed for it. We came to see overlaid, and I should say, when Alderman Gay brought this up, the idea was, okay, we want to improve the streetscape, make it safer, and we also want to create some more housing options. We have people living in this area, crowded in some cases, more people than should in a home. We have vacant properties, a higher vacancy rate than other parts of the city. And frankly, there's large opportunities for additional small-scale housing that could be completely consistent with what we have there today. In other parts of the city, we've created what's called an overlay district. It's basically an idea of applying additional standards to create different outcomes, specific outcomes. We've done 2 of these in Eastport that have been pretty successful, and they're mostly about maintaining the historic character of the area. The historic district in downtown is another overlay district. That's much more complicated. But for Tyler Avenue, we could do something that's similar in concept, but have different types of standards. So the project that we developed had a timeline that we've been sharing at a series of community meetings. You can see in green where we are here in July. We've had 3 community workshops going back to April. We had a community survey that was put out online. And we've been trying to share how this process moves forward. We kind of wanted to be clear that we're planning staff, we're working with community to develop recommendations, that would go into a piece of legislation that was ultimately the city council's determination whether it moves forward. It did move forward, and that's why we're here tonight as part of that process. We know that after tonight, the city council committees will meet, and that will most likely be in September, and it will probably have a vote in October. These community meetings were really well attended. This is the one in April at Tyler Heights Elementary. This is the one at Pitt Moyer in May. And this is the one in early June that was also at Pitt Moyer. So we did our best to get the word out through a variety of methods: flyers, postcards, yard signs, door hangers, e-blasts. Casey was very involved with that, as was Alexis, who's on maternity leave right now. And ultimately, coming out of those meetings and what we've heard, we came up with a purpose statement. I know it's a lot to read here. It's in the bill, it's in the ordinance. I won't read it here, but what we heard helped us understand what the goals should ultimately be for this neighborhood and how zoning could be used to get there. But essentially, we're trying to prescribe what can happen in the future in a way that helps people understand that it's going to be consistent with what they have today and won't be out of character with the pattern of development today. So that gets us to the recommendations. Here's a view of the streetscape today. You can see it's just wide 30-foot streetscape, narrow sidewalks. There's nothing really that encourages somebody to slow down. I want to spend a couple slides just explaining that there are things we can do today to improve safety along the streetscape that are not related to zoning. You know, this is an image of what the streetscape is today, essentially 16-foot wide lanes. Occasionally there's a parked car that people don't expect to see, and that's what causes a lot of the crashes. So we have proposed doing something like this, where we narrow the lanes, we formalize one lane of parking on one side of the street. We had a buffer between the parking and the driving lane, but the sidewalks essentially stay the same. This is just working with what we have. This may be the first place in the city ever where people are not opposed to losing parking on the street. So as far as I understand, but in plan, this is one intersection. This is an important intersection that goes to Tyler Heights Elementary, where you can kind of see how the street markings would play out. And this is something we are planning to do in the fall, working with Public Works. There's a couple bump outs at Woods Drive that are going to shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians and make them more visible. There's school crossing guards here in the morning and afternoon. We're using something called hardened center lines. This is a lot of stuff you're seeing on Hilltop Drive, Hilltop Lane today, excuse me. So it's work there. I think we can work here. We're going to be studying where Tyler becomes Hilltop as part of another project, because that's where a lot of people speed, and it's pretty dangerous. And then at the other intersections on Tyler, we're proposing other things to slow people down. But I want to share that because that's what we could do with, staples and glue, essentially. We can do that through a capital improvement project. It's not terribly expensive. It should have happened by now, candidly. But with zoning, we can actually do longer term improvements and actually dramatically improve the streetscape. We could widen the sidewalks. We can add street trees and planting areas. We could actually have a shared use path where people could bike or walk outside of the street, so it's safer. But to do that, we need to change the zoning rules, and that's part of this. I wanted to start here because the streetscape is so critical to this neighborhood. It's sort of a major defining feature, obviously. This is a little confusing, but this narrow gray line shows the existing sidewalk. Now, there's already a required setback for every property along this Tyler Avenue corridor. They're required to be 25 feet back from the street. With the zoning, what we're proposing is that setback doesn't change, but if you're fronting Tyler Avenue, 10 feet of that should be dedicated to improving that streetscape. This is something that we think could have a dramatic impact on Tyler Avenue. That setback change only happens if there's development on that lot. So it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. We've talked about the idea where people could donate that 10 feet to help, expedite the idea of improving the streetscape, but there's nothing that's going to compel anybody to give up that 10 feet. But certainly if a property is redeveloped, they should be contributing to a better streetscape than what we have today. That's the core idea here. So we have properties that look like this. We've been showing this image in every presentation. People are probably getting sick of it, but this is one opportunity for something that could be better than what's here today. We showed folks at the community meetings a variety of housing types that are all pretty consistent with what's in the neighborhood today. Nothing is really out of scale, out of character. Some of these are in the neighborhood today. We wanted to get a sense of what people like, what they thought would make sense. I want to acknowledge that on this sheet, you have two sizes of single family homes. You have this one, which is like your split level, house. A lot of these were built in the 60s in Annapolis. And then you just have a kind of one-story rancher. We don't really see any of these one-story ranchers being built in Annapolis today. And part of that is the cost of land doesn't make it economical. The other thing is the zoning doesn't really encourage it. You're still forced to put a house on a large lot. And we thought there was an opportunity to improve on that. But, this is an existing fourplex in the neighborhood. These are all Annapolis examples. This is a spread from the comprehensive plan where we wanted to highlight just how many interesting varieties of small scale housing types exist in the city, most of which are illegal today for reasons that we don't quite understand. There were cultural changes over time. Today, it would make sense to re-legalize most of these housing types because they contribute to the character of the city and are really in keeping with the character that we have, that we value here. So what we ultimately came up with was a system of allowing additional housing types to be permitted by right in this overlay zoning district, provided you have adequate lot size for those housing types. So that means to do a single family detached house, you would need to have 2,700 square feet of lot size. That's about half of what is allowed today in the R2 zoning district. That would effectively allow for a small scale house to be built. You could also do a single family attached, AKA a townhouse, a row house. To do a duplex, you need 5,400 square feet. This is essentially same footprint as a single family house. It just has two units, either side by side or stacked. See so many of these across Annapolis, including along the Tyler Avenue corridor. To do a triplex, a three unit home, or a fourplex, 4 units in one building, you would need 10,800 square feet. Seems like a lot of square feet, but that's actually pretty permissive as far as our zoning code exists today. And we think it's reasonable for those. You're going to have to accommodate parking and open space, your setbacks, et cetera. And then finally, cottage court is a home type that we already have in Annapolis today. You've seen these cul-de-sacs that have a group of small townhouses connected to each other in most cases. But very few of these are built today. They're not really encouraged in our zoning code. We want to encourage them. We think it's a house type, a community type that encourages community, and we think this is something that could exist here. So you need a larger lot size to accommodate that, but that's 4+ houses on a site. Typically, it'd be like 6 units on a site. as we were discussing before, I mean, height is really the standard in our bulk standards that defines the character of the neighborhood probably more than anything else. We recognize that and we heard it. And we're not proposing to change anything about the existing height, the maximum height. It's 2.5 stories or 35 feet. So all of these unit types that we're talking about would have to be within that height threshold. We are talking about changing the minimum width of a lot. And this is really kind of goes in hand with the lot size. It's a limiting factor in a lot of cases, particularly at Tyler Avenue corridor, where you have very narrow lots in some cases. You have quite a range of lot sizes and dimensions. It's perfectly reasonable, in our opinion, to have a single-family house on a 30-foot wide lot, to have a townhouse on a 16-foot wide lot, and so forth. This is really based on things that the market has already supported in Annapolis and are reasonable given the character of the neighborhood today. And then setbacks are another aspect of zoning that we wanted to look at as part of this overlay district. We didn't change things too much here. I mean, this 25-foot front yard setback is still a requirement. We talked about that 10-foot public easement that would be required with a new development. We are adjusting the rear yard setback, which today is 30 feet. This would be 15 feet in the overlay district. It doesn't mean that somebody can't have a extra deep backyard. This is just saying the minimum required is 15 feet. The 5-yard side setbacks are pretty similar to what we have today. I think they're at 6 feet today. But there are zones in the city that have a 5-foot side setback. It's not unusual. And so that's pretty consistent. Finally, community open space. Now, this is something that it's hard to imagine adding new parks to a neighborhood where every single property is privately owned, family residence today for the most part, with the exception of Tyler Heights Elementary. But as new development happens, there are opportunities to integrate open space in ways that can really benefit the community. Just a couple blocks away in the Primrose neighborhood, there is a corner park that a lot of people don't know about. I don't know the history of it, but it's woven into the neighborhood. It's a destination. Tyler Avenue could have something like that with a new development. We wanted to understand, first off, what kind of open spaces people might value. And ultimately, we want to require open space on new developments because it will help us to retain green space, tree canopy, and community spaces, that people can enjoy that could be linked together. This is just one example of a cottage court that has a communal open space that the residents can enjoy. This kind of thing could exist. So the requirement in the legislation is that for any development, including 3 or more buildings, there's a required 40% of the site must be common open space. And we have some standards for trying to integrate that with the buildings. It should be functional open space. It could also accommodate stormwater requirements and kind of do double duty. So you could be efficient with it. But and then finally, this is what we're aiming for. We're aiming for some scenarios that don't exist today, but are perfectly in keeping with the neighborhood. That could accommodate different household sizes, different income levels. You can see what a fourplex might look like here, what a duplex might look like with a cottage in the back. Now, we have a accessory dwelling unit law already in the city that allows for every residential property in the city to have a separate, quote unquote, granny flat in the back. But that's still secondary to it's a subordinate to the main structure. It can't be sold as a separate unit. So, there's an opportunity to carve out additional housing units that could be small scale, but still accommodate, single person, a couple, small family. That's what's not allowed today. And these are just some other options that could exist here. Borrowing these from a design firm that has done a lot of work in this type of incremental development in other cities. And, this is something that a lot of places are dealing with, opportunities to just slightly increase the number of housing units in a neighborhood in a way that expands housing options and improves liveliness of the neighborhood and opportunities for people to live in the city and who might work in the city. And so,
do you mind a question in line here, or do you want to?
I'm just about done. So I'm coming back to this image, which I think people could relate to. It's not that different from what's there today, but the houses are slightly closer together. There's a wider variety of housing types here, not just single family. And I just want to remind folks that we've had a website that Casey has done a lot of work on from the beginning of the project, where we've shared everything about this project as it unfolds, and we provide videos that TV studio Julian has made at all of our public meetings. We have a comment log where we've collected all the comments received, and we've just tried to be as transparent and clear as possible about the process, keeping folks up to date on meetings that are coming up, and we're going to continue to do that. So that's it.
I want to add one addition to what Eric said. We're not working with that consultant. We just use them as an example. We're not working. I just want to make it clear that we are not working with them.
Yeah.
We're just using them as an example.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, it's been just an in-house work by our planning staff.
So if you could go back a couple to the, I'm primarily interested in the cottage court examples.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not this one, but go back one that another one back. This one.
Mm-hmm.
So in this kind of scenario, do you envision? So say somebody owns a lot that maybe has a little house on it someplace on there, and they want to do something like this. Do you envision that they would own so they put, say, four units in this cottage court. Do you envision that the owner would own all of those, rent them, or could this be subdivided with some shared space to fee simple lots and sold to four different people with some common space? Is that possible in this scenario? Do you envision that?
Those are all
happening, or?
possible. I think we're agnostic when it comes to what's the financial arrangement. I mean, one thing that's in the
but nothing in the way that this legislation is provided in that first reader is written prevents somebody from, say, selling doing something like this, but having separate ownership of each of the lots with some, mini homeowners agreement for the shared space or whatever it comes.
Right. The same.
So not everybody wants to be a landlord.
No, agreed. The same subdivision requirements that already exist in the city code are not changing at all. Okay. What we are proposing in the legislation is currently you're only allowed one building on a lot, pretty much anywhere in the city. There's a few exceptions.
Yeah.
But for this overlay district, we do have a change that allows for multiple buildings on a lot. Now, there are instances of this on Tyler Avenue today. Multiple buildings on a lot. Some of them are not conforming, so they're sort of vacant because for no real good reason, in my opinion. So there is a home ownership issue in the city today. There's not many options for a family or a resident on, lower income, middle income, even to buy a house. So we think that there could be some interesting home ownership opportunities that come out of this with creative property owners. They want to create that.
So it's fair to say that for an arrangement, say like this, the most expensive commodity is the land, as you mentioned,
right?
And that the idea here is that with an arrangement like this, you basically can put a smaller house on a smaller piece of land that keeps the cost down. So, depending on the size of the lot, those houses, those four houses might be something on the order of 8, 9, maybe 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, I want
And
to.
if that was actually separate ownership with the requirements of the setbacks and stuff, you couldn't put anything bigger. So it sort of
Right.
naturally keeps, and this is really a question, would naturally keep the cost down because somebody couldn't buy it and then put a 5,000 square foot house on it, which is sort of what happens now with these large lots. If, somebody decided, well, I want to buy this lot and then put a 5,000 square foot house on, as long as it fits into the zoning, they can do that. And that sells for $1 million. It's not affordable.
That's absolutely right. I mean,
essentially what you're trying to go after.
we had a
is that.
slide in a previous presentation where we just showed that somebody today with, there's lots, and there's many lots in this neighborhood that might be 50 feet wide and 300 feet deep, 400 feet deep. You could max out that entire lot today. You maintain your setbacks. You have a 30-foot backyard, a 25-foot front yard, 6 feet on the sides, and you build a massive mansion. And that could happen today. We're trying to, and I want to show this slide because, the neighborhood is kind of bracketed by these developments. That one hasn't started yet. The one on the right is called Grissom Square. It's at the corner of Tyler Avenue and Bay Ridge Avenue. Single family homes. Parkside Preserve is a little farther away off Forest Drive. But I mean, this is the trend, and this is kind of what our land costs and zoning code really push the development to. This is the way of recouping costs. And so we think that if we change the requirements, a little bit, we can get the kind of housing that is just really not created. That's the goal. And just aiming for small scale housing types. That's what we heard. I mean, people like that type of housing in the neighborhood today. We're not really trying to change that. So
Just affordable single family.
right. I want to qualify, because we get this, we can't control the market per se. We don't know what the prices will ultimately be. But unless you have a greater variety of options, you don't really have a chance. I think generally speaking, smaller housing types are going to be more cost effective. And if you kind of make it easier for the builder to save costs here and there, and they can cut costs and pass it on to the consumer. So
One other question. So on the issue of the 10-foot easement, is in the community, I was only at one of the 3 community meetings, and I didn't hear anything about that. Is that something you discussed in the community meetings?
yeah,
And-
at the last meeting we shared. And the last meeting, this presentation is essentially what we presented at the last community meeting in June, where we wanted to share specifically what was going into the legislation.
And how was that received?
It seemed better. So in the previous meeting, we had talked about this idea of, essentially we had talked about the same idea, but we had said with a new development coming in, they would be required to put in like the actual design, a wider sidewalk, a planting strip,
Yeah.
And what we heard was it might be kind of weird to have like one lot doing that and the next lot, you have this like zigzag. And we kind of agreed, the city is in a better position to sort of implement the entire streetscape improvement at one time. It would be more cost effective. And so we just said, well, all right, in the short term, just being able to dedicate that space for that future improvement would be beneficial. So it's there, but
But you don't have any plans to narrow the curb to curb width? You can leave that alone?
no, I don't think, yeah. I think we need to preserve at least some street parking and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think especially if you do have more units, you're eventually going to need the street.
Can you go back to the picture of Parkside Preserve? That building would not be allowed over.
No, it would be. It would
Why?
be. It's just.
Is that?
Oh, well, actually, no. I guess by height, it would be too high. It would be too tall. I'm saying, Yeah, it'd be too tall. You're right. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be too tall. I'm just that's the main limiting factor.
Okay.
Yeah,
Another
take one
question.
floor off.
Another question. You could go some slide which sort of shows the narrow lots. It was early, very early. One of the very first. No, keep going back. It was like it was a map. Keep going.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. No.
Yeah.
Well, okay. The one on the right. So you propose driveways, and there are a fair number of driveways already inhabited, correct? What are the possibilities of a one-lane, one-way alley in the back, especially on the properties to the northwest,
Hmm.
the left side? And any new development would require a similar easement for a narrow lane, narrow alley. But what that would do is it would relieve driveway pressures. It wouldn't have to be so many driveways. People could access a smaller home in the back. It would allow garbage trucks to go through. You know, it would be a city street, so it would an alley, so it would be plowed, and it would be similar to the sidewalk easement. One hopes over time develop into the wider sidewalk. It might develop into an alley also, because that would take off a lot of pavement. Follow me? Or people might want to build a garage back so that they could sort of use their property more efficiently. What do you think of that?
Well, we thought about it, and frankly, some of the property owners, would like to have that kind of access that we've spoken to, but it's pretty challenging. I mean, you're right. I mean, you do need to either require an easement if future development happens, or you have every property owner agree to it and do it at one time that way. But the issue with the lots that are on Tyler, that section closer to Bay Ridge Avenue, is that you don't have an easy outlet in either direction. And so that's kind of a limiting factor. And then, I mean, there's one situation on the portion of Tyler between Hilltop and Forest where you have Marta Lane, which basically becomes a gravel driveway next to a church. And, that could be improved and look better and provide an alley access to some properties. That would be, and that's, there actually is a clause in the legislation specific to that, because that is a pretty straightforward improvement. But it would really only impact the properties that are adjacent to that MARTA extension. So we fully agree that having some additional access to these properties would benefit them and give them more options, but it's pretty difficult to create today. I think we've kind of we've created a challenge for ourselves here in the way this neighborhood has evolved.
What percentage of the property?
I think it was about 16% vacancy.
16, 18?
Yeah, about 16%. Yeah.
And does that include any vacant lots?
Yeah, it would be vacant lots and buildings.
Does that include homes that are not inhabited, structures that are not inhabited?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any grasp of what the kind of ratio of rentals to ownership is?
Is about 42% rental, which, is actually, that's consistent with citywide trends, but for a neighborhood that's predominantly single family homes, it's much higher than typical for what it's worth.
There are also an excessive amount of duplexes there too.
They're what?
There's on Conley, there's an excessive amount of duplexes, and there's the row homes there too.
You know, I should have explained this at the beginning. What you're looking at here is the existing zoning. So everything in this cream color is R2, which only allows for a single family detached home today on a 5,400 square foot lot. Everything in orange is R3 zoning, which is allows us slightly more in terms of housing options. You're allowed to do a townhouse, which we call a single family attached, on 3,800 square feet. A single family detached can be on 3,800 square feet as well. And so that's why you see these duplexes in this orange area. And then down at the Forest Drive, this is where the Annapolis Seafood Market site is, and that's commercial zoning. And I think for all intents and purposes, this won't have much impact on those properties, which will most likely be developed as planned developments and be much more complicated and involved, you know. But what we're trying to do is create rules that are easy to understand, that benefit property owners today, that don't require attorneys. And I mean, no offense to real estate attorneys that might be in the room, but we're trying to enable, we talked to a lot of property owners during this process who frankly want flexibility to do things with their properties they can't do today. I believe you've already received some written testimony that, you know, talked about just wanting to build a family compound, you know, houses for family members, but the cost of running utilities to those, an additional house, they'd want to put multiple units in that house. And, you know, they have a 400-foot deep lot that they haven't done anything with. So that's really the intent here.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. And the first person is Thomas Newquist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all the folks up here for taking time to hear from us today. I have to say that Eric Lisinski, he doesn't know our neighborhood. My wife I live on 1215 Martle Lane, and my wife has lived on that street since about 1965. And when we got married, we built our home there because my father-in-law lived across the street down a little bit. So I guess a couple years later, so we built our home in '83. I don't see what the problem is. Why can't a person have a backyard so children can play and families can grow? I have several of our parts of our family on our street, a couple on Tyler Avenue. When the house next to my father-in-law went up for sale, it was a very deep lot. He bought it so he could watch his grandchildren play, and he still does that today in his 80s. We have the family gatherings there, and we try to keep a little bit of it as a neighborhood. And you know, the homes that are making changes on the street that they're selling, when Mr. Sears passed away, they added on to his house, and the add-on was like twice of what it was. And there's probably 6 families living in there. But just a few of the points. That some of this drive, I think, there's a person on Tyler Avenue that has bought up, say, 8 lots. And his lots all look the same. He has one color fence he likes to have. But he has the property that backs up to Tyler Heights Elementary. There's a little horse stable back there, and I remember when there was a horse in that stable. Okay? And he's cut all the big trees on that lot. Eventually, his tenants have been cutting them trees down, and branches and crap are laying on the ground. But this will benefit somebody like that. But just to say, well, let's put this little home, put here, folks, what we got to think about, we said possibly alleys. We said put these homes in the back. City only maintains your sewer 5 foot from the curb. So they're still going to have to worry about the clean outs and things. We don't plow alleys. They're private. There's a lot of things in the city that, people see a lot of homes in different neighborhoods. We don't give service to them because we don't recognize that kind of pavements and things, like along West Street at Monticello. There's that little community, and they built that beautiful walkway there. We don't maintain, city doesn't maintain that. These people are going to have to figure that out. My biggest concern, I have a lot of stuff written down. He was talking about, we could put these poles here like we do on Hilltop Lane. They work really great. Try driving a fire truck through one of them, okay? I don't drive one anymore, but I had one try to pass the other day on Hilltop Lane, and he had to wait between cones to try to make a pass, and you can't pull over because they got another V there. That I'm like, so when we got our new director of that department, it's like, can you address the poles on, they have like overkill on Hilltop Lane. And if you talk about doing that on Tyler Avenue, that would be really terrible. Here's a thought: put a speed camera and make money. That's what the people on Tyler Avenue want. They want to slow down. Anyway, I just think it's a bad idea. Just try to cram all these homes in there and forget about the families, because you're going to get. My concern. Bad enough, they're going to, if they build at the end of Martel Lane, between Martel Lane and Tyler Avenue, my property value is going to just fall right in the ground. And honestly, if they do that, we'll probably, even though I built the house myself, drew it with white piece of paper, what it looked like, we would probably sell it. But anyway, I would really strongly ask that one other thing is, he was saying how we advertise this. My friends in Primrose, nobody received any advertisement, emails, postcards, letters. I've lived on Martel Lane. My family's on Martel Lane. And no one has received any information. I'm here tonight because this gentleman over here he was on the street asking people if they were going to come to this tonight. And it's like, I spoke to my father-in-law. It's like, what's going on? Well, I think they're trying to put all these homes on Tyler Avenue and change the configuration. But it's just a lot of stuff going on. One of my fellow firefighters, he had a friend in Galesville that wanted to put another seafood market back on that corner. And no, we want the housing, and it's going to mess up this plan they're studying and all this. And so it's going to probably get houses and things. But I just think it's going to make so much congestion, and it's just not a good idea at all. And I like the idea of a community. I like the idea of my grandchildren coming over. And I hope when my father-in-law is gone that we still are able to keep that property and keep family going to it. That's what we've done.
So, sir, are you arguing for things staying the way they are and not implementing any of these
Yes,
changes?
sir. Yes, sir. I don't think it all sounds good about building these little houses and everybody can afford the American dream. But in reality, strength is building a neighborhood and getting people that can go back and forth to people's homes and have yards to actually play in, instead of having to go down to a park somewhere to play. Keep Annapolis a little bit like it was. And like I say, the utilities and the configurations for a garbage truck and things like that will be a nightmare, because you're going to have that little house, but you're still going to have to run that sewer out to the street, because the city of Annapolis is not going to take care of you. It's just not going to be, as where you or I would build a home and it would have that 25-foot setback. Okay, well, but my sewer's in my driveway right by the curb. The city's going to come take care of it and run it. If these people have a sewer problem or other other issues, and they're in that back lot. I'm sorry, we only take care of this. I've worked for the city of Annapolis 37 years. I hit 37 years in March. So I know a little bit about it. And it's not going to be as easy as people think.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for hearing us. I really hope that you, give this a bad review and don't accept this.
I've taken some notes about some of the issues you've raised, and I'll bring them up later.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Asbury Parker? Sir?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us come up and talk a little bit about Tyler Avenue. I lived on Tyler Avenue for 3 years. Oh, I'm sorry. Asbury Parker, 1210 Tyler Avenue. City of Annapolis employee. I work on a city payroll. I mean, I get paid from the city, and we don't make that much money to see the taxes go up in the air. 2%, well, 2%, 3%, whatever it was going to be. I'm quite sure rezoning will make the taxes go up in the air. What he proposed when he first started talking was the traffic. Now, the traffic, yes, it's outrageous. Then he started talking about putting the houses on the properties. So if you need to slow the traffic down and you put new houses on these properties, how are you going to slow the traffic down? They need a way to get out, get in, plus shoot across from Tyler Avenue or Forest Drive to Bay Ridge Avenue to Eastport. And my thought was, it's just, I'm not opposed to it. Just want to be able to slow the traffic down, like the guy said over here. Put cameras up. City will make money that way. But this traffic is outrageous. If I can approach the bench to show you something, if it's okay, can I approach the bench to show you something?
What do you have?
Just a picture.
A what?
A picture.
Oh, on a phone?
Yes, sir.
Come on.
I just want to show you something. How fast you gotta go to do that on top?
Pretty fast. It's a wide open street, man.
Yeah. So able to slow down the traffic.
Let us talk.
How fast you gotta do it on Tyler Avenue?
Too fast.
That's like that every day. But thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm right across the street. Yep.
Oh, you're right on the corner.
Corner. That's where the huge truck and trailer park.
Right. You can't even see that.
You can't. Thank you.
George Gallagher?
I am George Gallagher. I live at 1212 Barbud Lane. One point of clarification. At the beginning of the meeting, Eric stated that this was being sponsored by Alderman Gay. One thing I want to point out is that at the May meeting, which was very well attended and very vocal, Alderman Gay was not there. At the June meeting, that was very well attended and very vocal, he was not there. At the city council meeting, when this was put onto the agenda verbally by the mayor, which surprised us all because we didn't know it was going to be on the agenda. We've been looking at the agenda to make sure that we could comment. Luckily, and some of us were at City Hall and we were able to make some comments about this planning and zoning. So that was very concerning. The so-called sponsor of this project is a complete no-show. So Tyler Avenue community was told on June 10th in a community meeting and on June 16th at a city council meeting that residents could provide more input to the Planning Commission about their concerns sometime in September. And I actually had Alderman Savage, when I came to here to speak, I asked him, when is this going to be, back up before in City Hall for us to comment on it? And he said September. But now it seems to be rushed onto the Planning Commission agenda for July 10th. And so we had to scramble to get the residents to know that this was actually going to happen. Unfortunately, the staff report sent to the Planning Commission does not reflect the concerns and opposition to this zoning agenda expressed at the May and June community meetings. The public opposition to this zoning project, like I said before, was very vocal. I suggest a revised staff report be provided to the Planning Commission that highlights the significant objections communicated to the planning staff during these community meetings. One particular statement in this July 3rd staff report makes no sense. It quotes, however, the current street design combined with the very low density land use patterns has encouraged a trend of dangerous driving, which has led to hazardous environment for pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users. I don't see how having large backyards with flower gardens, swing sets, fire pits, pools, and tool sheds has anything to do with the traffic problems on Tyler Avenue. It's not the backyards that are causing problems on Tyler Avenue. It's the design of the roads and the sidewalks itself. What the community wants is streets and sidewalks. They want them fixed. I mean, you already heard one gentleman say that. We don't want, $600,000, $700,000 townhomes with no backyards. Once you take away the backyards, there's very few communities in Annapolis that still retain backyards. I have a big, beautiful backyard, as Mayor Buckley said, and we've got swing sets and we have a trampoline, and we don't want that eliminated as an option because the planning and zoning talks about options. Well, why are we going to eliminate the options of having backyards like another gentleman talked about? The true objective of the Tyler project is to incrementally eliminate single-family homes with backyards, which will result in forcing elderly people on fixed incomes and working-class Annapolitans off their property and out of Annapolis. This zoning change will open up Tyler Avenue to predatory development. The claims of affordable housing is complete nonsense. What will actually happen is high-cost, high-density housing. What's omitted from the whole discussion is the city budget, which is ballooned to an enormous $204.8 million. So instead of trying to find ways to increase the tax base at the expense of the residents in Annapolis, let's take time to look at cutting the bloated city bureaucracy. It's grown by hundreds of employees. And also look at our budget problems. Our city budget in 8 years has increased 93%. Ward 6 is the canary in the coal mine. We obviously have almost no representation from our ward. Our alderman never shows up to the meetings. So I feel that our ward is being exploited. This rushed, heavy-handed zoning change is happening. If it happens here, this approach is going to be rolled out across the whole city, particularly the other disadvantaged wards like Wards 3 and Wards 4. All zoning and planning changes that are being rushed through the Planning Commission in July, in this meeting and the next meeting, should be paused until the upcoming election. These changes are going to have significant impacts to the communities across Annapolis and deserve full transparency and a vetting of all Annapolis residents. So if we lose these single-family homes with backyards, they never come back. They're gone. And I don't want to see that happen. I have 3 children. I'm sure other residents would like to retain an element of residential units that are single-family homes that have backyards. So please keep this in consideration. Thank you.
Keith Lasik.
Yes, my name is Keith Lassick. I own a property and home at 1202 Tyler Avenue. And I don't see any way that this rezoning is going to benefit me at all. My property's not very wide. It's 75 feet wide by it's 300 feet deep. But we've lived there, my wife and I have lived there for 23 years. And we've had a pool 23 years ago built for the grandkids in the backyard, which takes up most of my back lot. And everybody that I've spoken to on the good people on Tyler Avenue, they just want the cars to stop going 50 and 60 miles an hour. I'm out cutting the grass in the front and I tell them to slow down and they just go faster. They laugh and go faster. But I've complained to the city about the speeding and nothing's done. I have illegal immigrants living to the left on one side of me and they have a log splitting business. It's very loud and disturbs my wife that's ill and nothing was done about that. Nothing's done about the speeding. And that's all we want is the cars to stop going 50 and 60 miles an hour on Tyler Avenue. And they do go that fast. And I just think people want to be left alone and have their backyards, which is why we bought the property 23 years ago, was because of the backyard. And like I said, I have a swimming pool there and that takes up most of it. And we just want the people to stop speeding. And I was concerned about, he had spoken to me, I missed the last meeting, but the meeting before, he told me about the zigzag sidewalks. Well, I don't plan on selling my property. And he said, if my neighbor does, they would extend the street there, but not on mine. So the street sidewalks would be like zigzag. And I don't think that would be very attractive. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question. Mr. Lassick, I have a question for you. You said a couple of things, but two of the things that you said were slow down the traffic, right? And zigzag sidewalks don't seem to really make any sense. So my question to you is, if it would be effective in slowing down traffic to do the streetscape as has been suggested.
I'm sorry, I can't.
If it would be effective to slow down traffic, would you give up your 10 feet of property in order to make a sidewalk, a tree strip?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't see why I should have to. There should be other ways to slow down the traffic without me giving up my property.
Okay. Okay.
There are never police.
Nobody's forcing you.
I mean, I don't think it's right. I mean, there's other ways that they slow down the traffic without me giving up my property.
You don't have to.
I work hard every day. I'm 72 years old and I'm still working hard to pay the property tax. I take care of my house. I keep my property nice looking. I cut the grass. I take care of the house and keep it nice looking. I've been told it's one of the nicest looking houses on the street, but all we want is the cars to stop going 50 and 60 miles an hour. And they do go that fast.
Why has not the issue of speeding been addressed by the city separate from the housing issue? I mean, that seems like something.
All we want is the cars to stop speeding. We don't want rezoning.
I know, but why hasn't that been addressed?
Wait. You'll have your turn.
Eric, can you
Question-
Mr. Bellamy, I would just say the city has studied more than enough documentation to prove that something should be improved. I don't have a good answer for why it hasn't happened yet. But, we have been, a lot of the improvements to streetscape, there's a backlog of those projects. We've been waiting to have a traffic engineer on staff. We have one now who's been on board for about 6 months, and this is a high priority for him. So
it should be. It sounds like it should be.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a public works issue than planning and zoning,
Right.
but yes.
We do want to add that during the presentation, there are immediate street improvements to help with the speeding. And we have spoken with DPW, and if the improvements aren't sufficient and speeding continues, that cameras are an option. that's like it's seen as a last resort, as
This has been going on for years and years, though, and nothing's been done.
Yeah, it really
Like I said, and I have-
someone is seriously injured because of a speeding car.
Halfway down Tyler Avenue, there's a cross where somebody was killed from the speeding. You know,
Well, something's being done.
I really appreciate it.
I mean,
like I
this is
said,
the most attention that's been paid to Tyler Avenue in my 25 years on the Planning Commission. Okay. Okay?
all right, thank you.
Greg Cusimano.
So thank you for this opportunity. I didn't have a question until I started to hear a lot of the comments.
Sorry, can you say your name and address, please?
Craig Cusimano. I live on 306 President Street, Ward 6. I filed today to represent Ward 6 as a candidate. And my question would be, why is it necessary to get an approval before the next election? And I'm asking that as a very, I don't know the answer to it. I'm just asking that perhaps there is a way that we can get together to really better understand the needs of this. I know there's a lot of work that's been done. It's very important work. These are very important concerns, but is it possible that we can wait for the election to really push this to the next phase?
I don't think that there's a very clear and definitive answer to that. There's no clear and definitive answer to that. There's not. Okay? I don't think anybody's pushing it. I think that this came in an ordinary course of affairs of legislation, and in trying to affect the comprehensive plan and the goals that you saw.
Yeah, I respect that, and I support the comprehensive plan.
I don't perceive any dark conspiracy or anything.
No, and I don't either, and I'm sorry if I made it sound that way. What I do know is that Ward 6 has not had the representation that it deserves. I would like to change that. I hope I'm able to change that. And I think this is a particularly unique situation. And I just ask that perhaps that is considered as we move forward. These people deserve it. We all deserve it.
I hear you. All right. Very good. Beth Doolin. Okay. Gabriel Solano.
Good evening. My name is Gabriel Solano, and I reside at 1204 Tyler Avenue, and I thank you for this opportunity to be able to address the committee at this time. I know that you use the term overlay, but George, who is a former city planner out of the city of Irvine, understands what is happening, and it really is gentrification. I lived in New York City for 35 years and saw what gentrification does. It first hurts the minorities, but also the elderly. Because as these types of things occur with dense housing, if you, Eric, could go to one of your slides where you show the forecourts, please. Correct. So on a cottage court, that could not be built on an existing lot. It would take multiple lots. Maybe some people in this room can do it, but others can't. But if this lady who lives on a corner lot and somebody decides they're going to buy 2 other lots next to her and they're going to be doing construction, she has to live with that construction. She also has to live with perhaps her property being decreased in cost or decreased in value, and also living with higher property taxes, which she can barely afford. Many of the residents and surrounding residents would be trapped by more traffic. You mentioned Conley Drive and the other, I forget the name of the other street. I call it the Horseshoe. That has a lot of residents in it with multiple cars, People have landscaping businesses and they are parked on the street. With this type of construction going on, they would never be able to get out of their particular streets. So really what this is looking for is not for the benefit, as I believe one of you said, not for the existing residents, but for new people who will come in. And that's not fair to your taxpayer base and people who have put their lives here. This is an historical street that has supported families since its beginning. It started with sharecroppers. Single-family homes, as we're seeing, are disappearing. You talk about affordable housing. So if we take these cottage courts, they're going to have to buy the land. And that land is going to cost, what, $180,000 per lot? Maybe more. Each unit will cost over $400,000 to build. So we're now all talking of well over $500,000 for a very small unit. That's not affordable because it's going to be more than that because the developer would have to make a profit. Now, you had the opportunity to develop affordable housing off of Forest Drive, where Lenmar has built this huge complex. The townhouses start at $700,000 and they have no land. The new homes, single-family homes that are so close together, I might as well be living back in New York City, are going for over $1 million. Those solutions are not affordable solutions. What is the affordable solution are the existing houses, whose average price goes for $400,000. The average price in Annapolis right now is $600,000. So you're talking about options. An option of affordable housing is what we have today. Now, if somebody wants to get a variance, perhaps that's possible, and build a couple of duplexes if they own the property. But to change the whole thing from an R2 residential single-family home with deep lots that people can enjoy their yard, they don't need a communal green space because they have theirs, is unnecessary. And it hurts the existing people who are there. And once again, it would increase taxes, especially for the most vulnerable people. And then the people who live behind us on, I believe it's Rosebud, they're going to have to deal with more traffic. And they're going to have to deal with construction. And who knows if they're not going to be next. And those communities have even more minority-owned homeowners in there, where elderly grandmothers suffer to make their property tax payments. We're going to push single-family houses completely out of Annapolis. And I know there are some people who believe that's a good thing, that dense housing provides what you call more options. But let's understand what options mean and what affordability means. So we hope that you take into consideration to leave us alone. And if you like this idea, put it on your own street, not on ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Well
All right.
said. Thomas Hudson. Thomas Hudson? Oh, sorry. Mary. What? Okay. 1204 Tyler? Okay.
I'm Mary Quintanilla at 1204 Tyler Avenue. And the home that we own, I want to say it was built maybe around the 1940s. And when we purchased, maybe in 2011 or 2012, it had been set up as 2 apartments in the home with separate BG&E meters, and they were licensed with the city, along with a carriage house and a garage apartment. And they both were licensed with the city and had separate BG&E as well. The gentleman we purchased from, he had fallen ill, and I think they were built 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And so what happened was, when he fell ill, the non-conforming use that allowed him to continue renting because they were grandfathered in. He lost that. They were considered abandoned. So when we purchased, they'd only been vacant for maybe 2 years. We were never able to rent them. So we have a carriage house, a garage apartment, and it's technically the main home is 2 apartments, but it's just to 1 family because we couldn't reinstate any of the other licenses. So it kind of feels like a shame to me because the parking, I would say maybe like 6 parking places there. It's almost half an acre of land. And it's unfortunate that everything has to just sit vacant for all of these years. And I get excited about the idea of like being able to have the homes rented again and have families there and make a public space where you could have some type of little, like a mini rain garden to manage the stormwater, or like a children's nature nook with a reading bench and like a shaded canopy of trees. It's just a waste to me of much needed housing and valuable land to let these non-conforming units sit unused for over a decade. And while this zoning change looks to the future, my property is simply returning to the use it was originally built for, a use that serves the community, has served the community for decades. And then just to touch on owners being nervous about their yards, this isn't a mandatory thing, so nobody would have to develop their yard or build more homes on it or lose their backyards. It just would be an option for people who do want to provide more housing for residents. And that's it.
Thank you.
May I point something out?
Larry, Tom, 1116 Tyler. What's that?
So we did have a question from the audience, but we generally don't have comments back and forth. It's just your testimony.
And after we're done with the sign-up sheet, you come up.
Yep.
We're not limited. Mr. Tom?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Larry Tom. I reside at 1116 Tyler Avenue. My wife and my family have been there since 1986, almost 40 years. I'm going to be very brief in my comments. I am here to speak in support of this ordinance, 2925. I want to compliment the staff in the 3 community meetings that they sponsored and held. They were very precise and very articulate in the approaches they chose and in the way they identified the problems that we living on this corridor experience daily. And I think that process of those 3 community meetings was an iterative process. I think as each meeting progressed, they took into consideration the concerns that most of us had and expressed during those community meetings. And that's embodied in this ordinance that's before you. The issues of traffic, you've heard from my neighbors, that's a real problem. And I think there are going to be some real solutions that we're going to see forthcoming. The issue of land use changes, in my opinion, the fact that this is an overlay district and not an upzoning speaks volumes to me in the staff's ability to hear what we have to say about draconian changes in land use configuration. I think that the standards that are embodied in this ordinance, particularly under 20 and 60030 and subsequent sections, allows for redevelopment of properties, large lot properties, in a way that's compatible to the existing neighborhood. And so that's to me, a very positive approach. And then I think as a result of some of these changes, the opportunity of having some community amenities, I think, is also a very positive thing. So given those three reasons, that's why I'm supporting this ordinance and ask you to support it as well.
Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Tara Stout. Did I pronounce this correctly?
I think
She left. Okay, we've come to the end of those who signed up early. And is there anybody else who would like to speak? So come up one at a time. Announce your name and address, and I'll keep track.
May I? Shelley Sogging. I live at 1211 Tyler Avenue, corner of Tyler and Janwall. And some of what people said, I think, was it Mary? Okay, yeah. It sounds lovely. I love what you're saying. I mean, I wish I had that when my daughters were growing up. But the thing is that the more the neighborhood is gentrified, the more it becomes idyllic, the higher our taxes go. And I don't want to have to leave my home because I can't pay my taxes. That's why I so desperately want the changes not to happen. Yeah, fix the traffic, bring police and bring in cameras, but let us live in our homes. Don't chase us away, which is what happens with gentrification. Thank you.
Next. Next.
Hello, my name is Giannis Caquiani. I own 1237 Tyler Avenue.
John, what?
Giannis Caquiani, 1237 Tyler Avenue. I'm for this change because I think it's a positive change. We do have a problem with traffic. We do have a lot of issues on the street, but this is an opportunity for the city and the residents to have something positive happen. Eric's worked great on this. I haven't really spoken to Dewan a whole lot about this, but this was his one that brought this up, and this is a great opportunity for the city and for the residents. I think there's a lot of misleading people. People don't like change, but some people in our neighborhood already have their houses that are 4 houses deep on those deep lots, but then they don't want anybody else to have that same opportunity. And taxes are going to go up no matter what. So, you know what? That's the reality of life. We live in a city. We live in, the cost of living is expensive. We all know that. And, we do what we got to do to survive, and that's it. And at the end of the day, this is a great project. Eric's been very transparent about the whole situation. The last meeting I went to was on, I believe, May 6th, because June I couldn't go. And man, this guy took a hell of a beating. I mean, they beat him to hell, one guy. And it wasn't fair. That guy actually owes him an apology and is here today. But at the end of the day, this gentleman's been very transparent about this overlay. And I think this is a wonderful thing for the city of Annapolis and for our community to help more people have affordable housing. And at the end of the day, if you have smaller houses, more people can afford them. Look, if you have a backyard and you want to keep it, great, keep it. Nobody's making you do anything. I mean, we had neighbors telling us that you're going to be forced to sell and the city is going to take your property and they're going to make you develop it. And these developers are going to come in. Nobody's making anybody do anything. We're just looking for a nice change, a streetscape. I've got houses across the street from me where I live that have moss growing on the roof. That's the roof that's been there for 20 years. These houses have been here probably 50, 60 years from Sears and Roebuck, if not 70 years. And they're older houses, they're dilapidated, and there's a lot of kept up houses too, and there's some that aren't that are kept up that well. But at the end of the day, it's a positive change. And me, my girlfriend, and other people that have come to the meetings support this. Not everybody's willing to testify. When you come to these meetings, especially on May 6th, and you see the abuse that Eric went through. Let him speak, please. You see the abuse that Eric went through. Why would you want to testify? Why would you want to take a beat? I own a few properties on Tyler. I can do whatever I want with them. If I want to develop those properties today, yesterday, or 10 years ago, I can do that. Nobody can stop me. I can do that because it's my right as a homeowner. All they're doing is making an overlay for the whole community to make it a little easier. If my neighbor wants to have her daughter live behind her and build a house, why not? Why is it not possible? Land is valuable. The resources are here in the city. We have the roads. We have the sewer. We have everything here. You know, people are selfish. They don't want to see change because it's their way and only their way. So a lot of people come out here this evening and they do not speak for everybody in the community. I speak for myself and a few and other people that I've spoken to. A lot of people are scared to come out to speak because they don't want to get picked on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next. Well, all right. Do me a favor, write it down and give it to Mr. Ortiz, and then he'll hand it up.
Ready? Christos Pelicanos, 1238 Tyler Avenue.
Thomas.
Christos, Chrisistos. Last name Pelekanos. I'd like to concur with the previous gentleman, Giannis, and everything he said. Eric and his team have done a fantastic job. And at the end of the day, this is just an overlay. Nobody's forcing you out. Nobody's forcing you to do anything against your will. Taxes are going to go up regardless in the city. I was born in the city. And for the past 30 years, they've been going up. So that's not going to change. You can't worry about the taxes. You have to worry about yourself and what you can control. But I think people are very short-sighted and they talk about, oh, we want this backyard and our kids and all this, that, and the other. But have they spoken to their kids and what this would possibly bring value-wise to their children? All these people are of older age. So what's 20 years down the line? 25, 30. Are they thinking about their kids? Do their kids even know about this? It's a great opportunity. I'm in support of it. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
I don't think that that's a fair question to ask in public. I just don't think that that's fair. We have one more? Sure.
My name's Jennifer, last name Wilhoit, Wilhoit.
W-Y.
W-I-L-H-O-I-T. Wilhoit. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I grew up in Annapolis, lived here for many years. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I've watched the city change quite a bit over my time. And I know change is difficult. I did live on Tyler Avenue for a couple of years. I know the traffic is horrendous there. I've witnessed many accidents, some that have flipped over. But I believe that this project is a benefit to Tyler Avenue and the city of Annapolis as a whole. I think that Eric's proposal is very thought out from the beginning to the end. The immediate proposal that he laid out for the streetscape, I think, is important. If you adjust the traffic as you can, I know that this is a cut-through road, so I've heard that the police and fire, it's not good to put a speed bump in there because of police and fire, but maybe there's other things you can do to slow down the traffic. I think that as homeowners, they would have the ultimate decision if this were to be passed, whether or not they want to make any changes to their specific property. And I think that has, in the beginning, kind of got lost, but I think now it's kind of come back around that this is growth for the community. You can have 3 generations of a family living on one piece of property if you choose to build multiple dwellings or do something with a cottage court or something within your financial means and within the layout of your property. So I think overall this this is important and a benefit to the city. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Public hearing is now closed. Okay. Comments? Questions? I have a question. Let me just a couple of questions from staff to clarify a couple of things. I would ask you to clarify a little bit more the changes to the street. Street poles, you used a term that I'm not familiar with, some sort of temporary something. Yeah. What's a hardened center line? Is that a pole? Is that a set of poles?
Yeah. So this image actually on the right side there, this is an image from Hilltop Lane at Gemini, where the hardened center line is just a bump. It's a raised.
It's like raised rumple strips, like half little half domes.
Wait back. I can't take it from two directions at once. I'm sorry. Let them.
Well, it's designed to force drivers to take a more rounded turn into the street rather than cutting the turn in a way that might, hit a pedestrian. You basically encourage people to drive better, more cautiously. It forces them. So that's the idea. And you see, as you're coming up to an intersection, you see this raised surface along the center line or along the striped pavement, and it gets your attention. You could drive over it. It's surmountable, but it generally helps keep people kind of within a lane. And if you have that raised center line up close to where you're making the turn, you have to kind of go around it. So that's the intent of it.
Okay. And so there's not an issue for fire trucks or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Are street poles suggested anywhere?
Well, I think what the gentleman was referring to are the flexi posts. The only place that they are being proposed in these short-term improvements are those bump outs. It says bump out with quick curb. Yeah. Basically, these kind of rounded shapes around the corner here. Those are the only locations where where they're being proposed today. And candidly, I think that's one aspect of the design that probably has the least impact on driver behavior in this corridor. I think, this is a proven method at intersections, where you can do it on all four corners and you kind of shorten that distance for the crossing and you narrow the lane, or you make it the perception of the lane narrowing. But we don't have many other locations to do this. And so,
okay. So it's it's quick.
Yeah.
You don't have to tear up the street and build new curbs.
No.
It's temporary. You can experiment with it. And,
right.
Okay. Parking lane. You said there are very few cars that park on the street now. Is that correct?
They're intermittent. It's not like there's not a consistent pattern as far as we can tell. I mean, yeah. I mean, we heard some complaints about people parking large vehicles, but I've never driven down the street and seen a consistent row of parked cars. It's every so often, but in a pattern, like an irregular pattern where you don't know when to expect a parked car. So that's the.
It also delineates where the parking should be. So if someone has to be closer to the curb, they would know to be within a line rather than just parking.
So when it says parking lane, you're considering put a stripe basically or whatever that indicate, okay, that visually narrows the traffic lane.
Yes.
Even if not physically.
Yeah. So today, because there's no striping at all, a driver has the sensation of there being essentially a 16-foot wide lane or even wider because there's no center line. So people, when they have that kind of space to move,
That's way wider than the lanes on Route 50.
right.
Yeah.
Right. That's definitely wider than a highway.
The telegraphs
Go
drive
back.
fast.
So can you go back? Yeah. Okay. So then buffer. Can you explain what that is?
Well, it's basically just for car doors. Candidly, it's, if you have parked cars there and you have a driving lane right next to the parked cars, it's space that, if somebody's opening a door, they're not going to hit a passing car. It's something that's commonly used if you have a bike lane next to a row of parking, but we don't really have the space, and it's like 3 4, it's 4 feet essentially. So it's kind of the leftover space.
Okay. So kind of what it looks to me is like you're kind of moving the street over. And this buffer is once again just painted.
Yeah, it's just striped.
Not hard to take.
Yep.
Now, have you thought about any kind of bump out, further in the middle of the block?
No, I mean, we discussed with the city's traffic engineer some improvements at Janwall. I think that, which is, this intersection right here, which is an important location because Janwall continues around to the school, which is below this image here.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a common route for kids going to school. Traffic engineer for the city was reluctant to put crossing there because the sidewalks on Janwall don't continue. They stop after just a few houses. And so, from his perspective, you're encouraging people to cross at a location where they're not going to have a sidewalk. And so they're going to be walking in the street. I don't want to speak for Casey, but I had a different opinion, candidly. That people are going to have to cross somewhere, and you might as well encourage them to cross at a location where they're trying to get to a destination in the neighborhood, rather than forcing them to walk all the way up to Woods Drive where there's a dedicated crossing. But I think you could debate that situation. But what we did is we proposed the hardened center line in that location. Each of these intersections, you have that hardened center line, which would, I think, alert drivers to slow down. It kind of changes the pavement enough, but
well, none of these are really part of the legislation.
Right. It's this context. This is a separate project, but yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah, all that should happen anyway.
It should happen anyway. Yes.
Okay. And so these things can be expanded upon, they can be subtracted upon, if this community, which has now come together around some of these issues, communicates with the department. Okay? So there are no street poles. There was a comment made about something about construction at the end of Marta Lane. Yeah, is that visible on this map?
I'll go back to the main. Oops, sorry. So it's hard to see actually on this. Find the cursor here. So Marta comes up right here. Yeah, it comes off of Forest, and it meets Janwall and the church right around here, and then it extends a little farther as it kind of becomes a gravel drive behind these 3 large lots, right at where it goes right behind these 3 properties here. And then it kind of goes into a wooded area that's behind Tyler Heights Elementary. And oh, is that the, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So yeah, Marta meets, right. This red area is what's known as the Wilson Tract. It's a property that's for sale right now. There's a real estate sign on it. It is next to a tire shop, and yeah, I mean it's a little bit challenging development site because of the tire shop, which is not part of the real estate sale. That's right. So there's a single family home site that's part of that block as well. But yes, MARTA ends. That's
So the comment was made if there's construction at the end of MARTA Lane. So you're talking about the end of MARTA Lane towards Forest Drive. That ends at the Wilson property.
I believe the comment that I heard was, concern about construction impacting property values, not knowing what that construction would look like. I didn't, at the time that comment was made, I wasn't sure what type of construction was being referenced. But I think if it's that Wilson tract, that's outside of the boundary of this overlay district. And frankly, everything in red there is zoned for commercial use and would be developed most likely as a planned development because
Does MARTA Lane end at that basically
where it says B2.
Where it says B2.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So that would be the access to that
Yes.
property.
Yes.
All right. Okay, that sort of answers it for me. Okay. You guys, question? I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify.
No, I asked the questions I had.
Yeah.
I think a couple things I heard. Universally, I heard a lot of talk about property values going down, but at the same time, they're talking about their taxes going up. Generally, it doesn't work that way, right? When your property values go down, they're tied to the tax rate, which means that your property taxes would go down in commensurate with that. So you wouldn't have negative on your property values, but somehow your property taxes go up. It doesn't work that way. If your property values go up, then your property taxes go up. If your property values go down, property taxes go down. That said, we live in a historic community, and historic communities have expensive historic infrastructure that we have to pay for. One way that your property tax rate would get increased over time is if we don't collect enough revenue, right? So revenue has to be collected to pay for the expenditures of the city. A lot of that is historic infrastructure. So when you're arguing against the possibility of slightly more development, but thinking that this is somehow like essentially what I'm getting to is that the arguments I'm hearing around the property taxes with your property values, they're not coherent. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is it doesn't work quite the way that it was being described. That said, moving on to another thing that I heard was the zigzags, right? Trust me, I've mentioned this before. I would love if the city had the ability to come through and fix all the sidewalks all in one time. It doesn't work that way. Was it? What I know. So give me 1 second. It would be great if the whole city could have that happen at one time. We all and most people anyway, would love to have nice, safe sidewalks. But the way that it works, the way that it's paid for generally is the ability for when new development or you have current housing stock turns over, that is the opportunity to be able to make improvements to the housing stock or the property stock. So when we look at things like our library, the Michael Bush Library, I just don't see people complaining about the fact that zigzags, right? It looks really nice. Where I live, it also does the zigzag because it has a nice sidewalk, newer development, has a grassy patch before it. Again, it's not something that is complained about. In fact, we wish that it were more of that. So that's how you do that. But one of the big things I want to get to is it's almost conspiracy theory of the city taking properties from people. That's not how this works. property is not going to be taken. You're not going to be forced to lose your backyard. Nobody is forcing anyone to lose their backyard. So I took a lot of notes here, got your names, each person said, if you want, please come talk to me sometime, but no, I can talk to you in depth about how the planning process works. No one is coming to you and saying you will be losing your backyard. The city is somehow taking it from you. That's called a taking. It's constitutionally illegal. It's not going to happen. If you choose to do it, more than anything, this is offering up options that you have say in whether or not that you get those options. But big thing is that what I'm hearing a lot of is you don't want your neighbors to have those options, right? That's what I'm hearing with a lot of these notes. And so I'm taking it all in, I'm understanding, but I do want to make sure that we point out some of the things that I'm hearing that are just simply not true.
So I'll make a comment about the gentrification issue. So since we're sort of making speeches, I guess I'll pile on here. But, I think what's happened in many other parts of the city is as places that are what the market would say are undervalued, i.e. they're cheap, get discovered, especially when they're large lots and somebody with some money buys a large lot, they're going to put a big home on it. And then all it takes is a couple of dominoes to fall, and all of a sudden people are like, wow, I can sell cash in, or I'm going to move to Florida, whatever, as you decide you don't want to be here anymore. That's gentrification. What I see and that's why the questions that I asked about the cottage courts specifically essentially counter that, because it essentially prevents somebody from saying, well, I want to put a 5,000 square foot house on here you could still do that, but if you took your property and maybe you put cottage courts on here, and you sold those, you couldn't then, I suppose you could buy them all up, recombine it, and then do that again, but not going to happen quickly. So I think sort of counterintuitively, the idea of providing these smaller, and they could all be single families. Nobody says they have to be duplexes or triplexes or quadplexes. These cottage court things are single family, like one building, one family. That's a single family house. Different than a 5,000 square foot house, but it's a single family house. And I think sort of counterintuitively, this idea helps prevent these lots eventually from being discovered as undervalued and bought by people with a lot of money that want to put $1 million homes on. And that's happened in many places. You look at places like Germantown, Homewood. That neighborhood now is essentially unaffordable. 20 years ago was maybe a little undervalued, and now it's been discovered. And eventually, the whole city, that's going to happen because a lot of people want to be here. And eventually, all of the undervalued property is not going to be undervalued. And the question is, what can you do with it? And if it's only if the zoning sort of encourages this idea of big expensive houses, that's what you're going to get. And I think things like this overlayment are a way to try to counteract that with allowing smaller houses or people who want to have rental, have multiple units, because that's the only way they can afford it, by having rental property. That's the common use case of a duplex. Is it allows somebody who can't afford a single family house to get some equity by affording something a little more expensive because they can rent half of it. And that's been a pathway for people to build equity in housing in many, many places. So I think just it's a little counterintuitive, and to think we just want it to stay the way it is. And I want a pony too, but I'm not going to get it. Sure, we nobody really likes change, but you have to accept that some change is going to happen. And the question is, how do you make it happen? How do you allow it to happen in a way that's not super disruptive? I think eventually, when this area, somebody decides, well, I can buy these these lots and put big homes on them, it's going to hit there too.
Eric, I'd like to ask you a question. You conducted all three town meetings.
Yes.
What was the general sense that you heard? Were people generally in favor of the proposal, with maybe some suggestions how it could be refined or whatever, or was there a lot of opposition to it?
Candidly, we heard a lot of concern about what we're talking about. I mean, I can genuinely say there was a lot of people, who didn't like what they heard. But I think that equally, there was a climate that I fault myself for not controlling better, at least in that second meeting, that really intimidated a lot of people from sharing their perspective.
How so?
So I don't think we had lots of meetings with other lots of people interrupting, loud, boisterous, just trying to control the conversation, and that's just not a civil way to do things. The third meeting, we tried to do it differently. We broke up the presentation more and had more Q&A opportunities, and that seemed to work a lot better. I tried to summon my inner middle school teacher, but that's kind of what we were dealing with. And I do think the gentleman who talked about people feeling afraid to share their perspective is accurate, because we had a lot more people at these meetings than chose to speak, and just candidly.
Okay, thanks for that.
Could you show the history slide? So 1931 was all farmland. 1952, big change. World War II happened. People came back. Some of those farmland parcels got broken up, right? By 1962, only 10 years, you're starting to see larger scale developments, smaller homes, many, many, many more homes than in 1950.
So by the way, Bob, in the 50s is when that was annexed into the city.
Okay.
That's an important piece.
What used to be by 1962 was changed radically. In simply 8 more years, look at all of the homes that are built right below the crook of Tyler Avenue. 1980, even more. Marta Lane, all of that goes on. 2002, I can't really see. By 2011, 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, it's like pretty much built the way it is. So what we're talking of, change happened. And there were many people who probably came before the city council and said, I hate to see the farm next to me go. People came before the city council and said, I don't want to lose my farm. Things change. Now, the question is what will this proposal do in terms of change and the pace of the change, and what kind of change? Okay, let me try to take those 3 things. First of all, there's a lot of concern, and it's a really valid concern, that when some of these properties get built on, right? Somebody decides to sell, and somebody decides to buy and build 2 homes on, or duplex, or something like that. Yes. In general, that will increase by the sale of those new properties. That will increase the values of your property. However, the value of your property is broken up into 2 parts: the land, and that's what will go up, but it's usually a small portion of your tax bill, whereas your home and the structures on it are a greater part of your tax bill. So what's going to happen when something like this happens next door to you, or down the street, or across the street, and somebody puts in that takes that vacant lot and puts in 3 or 4 townhomes. Well, yes, your land value will go up, but you haven't changed your home, so your house value will not go up, and your taxes will go up slightly. Okay, but you're also looking at value, and you're looking at the value for yourselves. You're looking at the value for your inheritance. If you need to go into a nursing home and you need to sell your property, you want to get the ultimate value. So looking at this in a more long-term way, and in fact, in a kind of a more, can't come up with the right word now, but greedy is, but self, for your own self's benefit is the way to look at it. The second thing is what kind of change is going to occur. Well, the kind of change has been very careful. I've never seen anything like this come out of the city. Very carefully calibrated. The heights, the size of the units on these properties, how much of the property has to remain in open space, the kinds of things that wants to get built. That's the kind of change you're going to see. You're not going to see wholesale change. The only kind of big change you'll see is if 2 or 3 property owners decide to sell to one person at the same time. Is that likely? It will occur, but is it likely to occur a lot? So the kind of change that you're going to see is any building that's built is not going to be any bigger than the buildings that are on there now. The fact that they may look better, they may be a little bit more substantial, but it's not going to be multi-unit apartment buildings that are 4 stories tall. Now, the issue about backyards is kind of a thing, it's like, yeah, I like a backyard. I was raised in a house with a backyard. I live in a house with a backyard, but I also am quite aware that, frankly, there are more people in the world. Kids are pretty adaptable, and nobody's telling you to take away your backyard. And I agree. Once a backyard is gone, it's gone forever. But people are adaptable. So the pace of change is the third thing. And I can't see this happening very quickly. I just can't. I wish I had some information or facts to get a feeling for how much or how quickly things change. This might happen. What's happened in other places? How many properties have transferred in the past 5 years? I mean, those are the kinds of things that would kind of give us some indication about what could be done. But I can't see this happening very quickly. There may be a couple of people who do want to sell. There may be older people and their children want to sell the property in order to, pay for college education for their kids. That's the nature of property. That's the nature of freedom. So what ultimately this comes down to, and I think it was said by one of my colleagues very well, is that people are saying, I don't want my neighbor to do something. This gives people options. Not many. There's not many options when you think about how narrow those lots are and how deep they are and how you got to get a driveway to the back and you got to get sewer to the back and you got to get electrical to the back. You're not going to be building the whole lot back there. People may build an accessory dwelling unit. They may build, something for their daughter, somebody said. They may turn structures which already exist on properties back into usable structures, as one person testified. So when you look at the kind of change, the pace of change, and what effect it'll have on people's abilities to stay there, I think that this is my impression, and I'm just speaking for myself, that this is a pretty well-formed proposal. I mean, from the very beginning the planning staff came in and said, we don't want to change the community character. We just want to make it healthier. That's all I have to say. Anybody else? Now, I do have some more questions that I would like to ask of staff because we got a bunch of written comment from, well, two written comments. One from Teresa Pico, who used to be actually the chairman of this planning commission, who lives, I believe, on Tyler Avenue. I can't remember the address, but she was very much in favor of it. But also Alderman Robert Savage came up with a number of suggestions, pretty detailed. May I go down them? Thank you. And I'm going to, on behalf of Mr. Savage, who can't be here tonight, one, require housing diversity, not just recommend it. Okay. Well, frankly, that's not a very difficult question to answer because you can't require people to do things. You can recommend it. You can build in by setbacks and heights and driveways and open space and the, you know, what kind of finish to use on the outside. You can kind of guide things. We're not in the position to require. So that's question answered. Two, lot sizes. Take a closer look at the minimum lot sizes, and he thinks that they seem kind of large. Might you respond to why you chose the lot sizes that you did?
Well, they're a modest reduction from what's allowed today. I mean, we really did not want to stray too far from what is allowed today in the R2 and the R3 residential zoning districts. And that was ultimately the guide. Mentioned it many times tonight. The idea is incremental change. We're not trying to go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds here. You know, we're really trying to enable small scale housing types that already exist in the neighborhood to be legalized and see if people find value in those and there's opportunities to create them. But
okay, modest reduction in lot sizes. And by the way, here's sort of a contrary viewpoint. He thinks these lot sizes are still too large, and people are saying protect, you know, the backyards, and all that's being proposed is a very modest reduction in lot sizes to maintain as many large properties as possible. Parking requirements. We need more restrictions on the parking areas, or allow no more than 1 or 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling unit. That's an interesting proposal.
yeah, so in reading his comments on the parking, I think he may not be seeing the whole context here, where we're taking parking spaces away from the street if we improve it with these short-term recommendations, you know, where we take 1 lane of parking away. So when you're taking parking away from the street, but then also not requiring as much off-street parking, there's, I think, potentially, you know, you're creating a problem there. I'm all for limiting future parking areas and impervious coverage, but I think from what we heard from folks at the meeting, you know, there's a concern about, you know, people having too many vehicles, parking too many vehicles in places and stuff, so forth. But we looked at the parking requirements today, and we just simply recommended modest reduction. You know, I think it's 1 required parking space per unit. Doesn't mean, and we don't have any maximum. I think what the alderman is suggesting is that perhaps we put maximums in there rather than having minimums. So as it exists today, the legislation has a minimum required parking space for each unit, but that doesn't mean, you know, a property owner can't add multiple parking spaces, and they could add 10 parking spaces if they think there's a need for that. What the alderman is suggesting is that perhaps we put a cap on the number of parking spaces, but, you know, personally, I'm a believer in the market, and the market will create that. If somebody is developing a house on their property and they're thinking about who's going to live there and what their needs are going to be, they're going to create the parking that needs to be there for that to be a hospitable place for their envisioned, occupant or household. And so that's the way that's my take on it. I think there is going to be a need for off-street parking. Just trying to keep it flexible, but
Yeah, I think the maximum idea, I understand where he's going with that, but that's maybe a bridge too far. I'm always in favor of just no minimum parking requirements. Just let the market decide. Don't require anything.
right.
Doesn't mean, and unfortunately, I think when you say no minimum requirements, what people hear is no parking.
Right.
And all it means is you don't force them to build anything. They build what they think they need. And
Right.
The city doesn't get involved in that decision.
Right.
Which I think is the right thing, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
About weak language in let me find it.
Page 721.
21. The maximum extent practicable. Sites shall be designed to locate parking areas in a manner that does not detract from the design of the buildings or structures or from the appearance of the existing neighboring building structures and landscape elements. In other words, locating parking areas so they don't impinge on or the neighbors. Minimize the lot frontage of parking areas on street and shield parking areas from public view, leaving a nice front yard. Avoid the location of parking areas within 100 feet. So he says change the language from just the maximum extent practicable to something else stronger, but doesn't suggest language stronger. Thank you. Focus on pedestrian movements. Driveway requirements excessive. Do we need to have all such units open up to aisles or driveways? Can't they just park on the street, walk to their unit, and have clustered parking nearby? Requiring driveways doesn't seem like a good idea. Once again, this is balancing the on-street parking with what you're going to require off, correct?
Yeah,
Trying to
that's
balance
right.
that.
I think what he's noticing in the legislation is there's already in the city's development code, the standards that apply to all zones require properties to have access to a driveway or a street, essentially. And in the legislation, it's currently a 12-foot driveway is required, or drive aisle. We just narrowed that to 9 feet, which is sort of the minimum. That's pretty much all we're saying with that. There is a reality that because of these deep lots and the difficulty in creating alleyways, to create that access, you are going to have a driveway, a shared driveway. You could have a parking pad in front and have walkways to other units. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have an extensive driveway, but in some cases you'll need to.
Okay. Permeable pavers. Pervious pavers should be required, not just recommended. I might answer that question. To put down pavers which allow water to go through is actually rather expensive. It's not the concrete or the pavers on the top that are expensive. It's the underlayment and the drainage underneath which makes it expensive. On the other hand, what I've been told by an urban tree expert is that bricks are actually and asphalt are actually not bad, that a lot of water actually soaks through. Bricks are actually good. which is why you see these big trees downtown. It's because actually water goes right through the bricks. Parking width maximums. Parking only 7 foot wide instead of 8.5 feet wide for each parking space. Tell me about that.
Well, I think some of his comments are looking at broad citywide changes, whereas we're focusing on an overlay district. I mean, I think we could change the parking dimensions for just this district, but I think we were reluctant to going to that level of detail for just an overlay district. I think a citywide change could or should be recommended, but I would want other opinions on that. I mean,
here's a possibility. Parking, the size of on-street parking spaces is just done with paint, correct?
It's not usually even marked, it's just.
Well, you're thinking about marking it so as to visually narrow the traffic lanes to slow people down, right?
Right.
The visual things that actually slow people down more than physical things that slows them down.
Yeah.
Actually, parked cars are the best way to slow traffic. Parked cars. So in any case, if later you want to make those parking spaces a little more narrow, all you have to do is take the paint off and put fresh.
Right. I'm sorry. I think when you said that, I was thinking about just the off-street parking spaces, but he's talking about the parking lane on Tyler Avenue. I mean, that could be tweaked, a foot here, a foot there. I mean, I think that's probably pretty doable. We haven't laid anything out yet. I mean, it's ultimately Public Works is going to have to weigh in on it.
The rest of his questions are rather just kind of idly thinking without any specifics. Okay, I've
If
covered
you
that.
don't mind, I'm going to add just one thing here. Looking at satellite imagery, I've gone back to, from present to 2018. In none of the satellite imagery am I seeing more than about 15 cars parked on that road. Measuring, it's 0.6 miles. So you have 0.6 miles. Doing the math on that, 0.6 miles. So you take 5,280 divided by times 0.6, and then divide that by 20-foot parking spaces. That gives you 158. Multiply that by 0.6 in order to take out for the streets and everything. So it still leaves you with 95 parking spaces on the street as a minimum. And in the satellite imagery, I'm not seeing more than 15. So you have lots of available. Even if you remove one side, that's 95 minimum parking spaces you have on that street. So you have plenty enough that if anyone's worried about not having parking based on what's currently showing, there is plenty.
I want everybody here to know that Mr. Cummings works for the Federal Emergency Management Authority.
I don't know if that's
better known
something
as
that I brag
FEMA,
about.
Which God hopes you don't need it someday. But he's the most technical person I've ever come in contact with, and I've learned to rely upon. Thank you. Okay.
So
any other
can
comments?
I just make one more comment about speed cameras, just philosophically, because they were mentioned a lot about traffic. So the idea of speed cameras, I think, often don't have much of an effect. All they really do is get people to really hate the government, because nobody likes to get fined $50 because they think they're just getting gouged. And so I think I don't think it really affects people's behavior generally, other than just to piss them off to get a $50 fine. So I think they cause more harm than good in general. I think physical changes to the street are the things that are going to stop the traffic, not speed cameras.
I also want to respond to one final point that was made, which is why approve this for the next election. And I don't think that this planning commission is in a position to make a decision like that. We're not a political group, and I don't think that I personally don't feel that we should take a position on that, and that that position should be brought up quite clearly, I think, before the city have hearings and at the committee hearings. I know it's difficult for people to get off and keep track of when these things are, but that's where some good work gets done. And I mean, you made some pretty strong points out there. They deserve to be heard. But I don't think that we should be making that kind of political. Okay.
Agreed.
Is there anything else? Are there anything else? Are there any motions to be made?
I would make a motion that we recommend as written.
I would second.
I want to point out before we begin a discussion on that motion, I want to point out that all that this planning commission does in the case of legislation is recommend one way or the other, or with conditions or suggestions to the city council. Okay? If there was a development that came in, a big development, so to say, would have final say, and the appeal is to the courts. All we're doing tonight is making recommendation, and if we have anything to add to the, to what we suggest to the city council's considerations, we would just say that. We do not have final say. Okay? By the way, I want to also, y'all have been really civil. You've made some darn good points. You think sincerely about these points, and you really acted well, and I want to congratulate. I want to clap for you. All right.
Much appreciated.
So there's been a motion and a second to approve or recommend that the city council approve this legislation. Any discussion on that?
And I'll just say that, I also appreciate Mr. Savage's thoroughness of going through all of the legislation, giving comments, and I went back and looked at all of those. And a number of these things I might quibble with the numbers. Maybe my personal opinion would be smaller lot sizes, for example. Think back to the prior piece of legislation. Obviously, it's something that I feel strongly about, but I'm not going to quibble with that because why should I supplant my opinion with all of the work that you've done with that? So I think regardless of whether we think some of these things, like maybe the numbers of parking, I think I would like to just let it stand there and not quibble with all the numbers and just accept your judgment on this, because you've done a lot of work, really good work on with the community needed. So I don't want to recommend any changes other than just to recommend as written.
All those in favor of the motion to recommend approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you.
I'd like to thank Eric and his team for all the work they put into this, and all of those who came to testify today and shared your thoughts with us. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Our next meeting is July the 17th, and by the way, findings. Okay.
I took the note.
Goes to Mr. Cummings. You're off the hook, fellow.
Huh?
You're off the hook.
I'm off the hook?
Yeah. It's going to Cummings.
I have it for this piece.
Oh,
yeah.
He'll
okay.
do a
Great.
fine job. July 17th, we have a number of things that are pretty crucial. This ADU thing and the short-term rental stuff. So
In the July 17th hearing is 100% virtual.
yes.
By the way, so it's not. If anybody wants to testify, you have to go through that process to do that via Zoom.
Written comment and so
Yeah.
forth. So anyway, I want you to be on the ball. We're going to get staff reports like Monday, the Monday before. They'll be posted into the.
We're actually trying to get the staff reports out tomorrow, end of tomorrow, for the two pieces of legislation.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully.
Can I put money on that?
Not much money.
Not much. Okay.
Not much.
At any rate, they'll go into the Google Drive by Monday sometime and get the latest. And get into it so that it doesn't turn into an interminable meeting. Okay? Okay? I don't know of anything else. We're not meeting in August. I protected.
Oh,
There are other boards and commissions which are not us. All right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good work, gentlemen.
Good job.